My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you're here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, Jesus, at this time of the year, we are beginning to think about summer plans. Maybe people are constantly asking us, what are your summer plans? What do you hope to do? Maybe a lot of us are in a position where we're finishing up studying, thinking about our exams and the life that lies beyond. Summertime is a kind of a perfect time for us to plan ahead, to relax a little bit, to have a holiday if we're fortunate, to get a bit of a break. And then long term, people are finishing up university courses and beginning to think about careers, thinking about interviews. So there's always a plan. And how we plan ahead to a certain extent helps us to make those first little steps. Well, we want to plan ahead, Jesus, but we want to plan ahead with you. And we want to be conscious of the fact that your plan is a far better plan than any one that we could conjure up for ourselves. Though often we learn that mistake a little bit late. Often we kind of run full steam ahead with an idea of what we want to do. Even at times, Jesus, what we think you expect of us or what you want of us, and it could be completely different. And maybe it takes a lot of effort on your part to try and wrench us back away from those little plans that we have for ourselves. Dream and your dreams will fall short. That's something that St. Josemaria said about where we might hope our apostolates are going, or where we might hope our life is going. The things that we would plan for ourselves are but a shadow of what you would plan for us. Now, I've just said the word planning about 200 times in the space of about 2 minutes. So planning is obviously what I want to pray about here, Jesus. But really what it comes from is the first reading of the Mass. It comes from the Acts of the Apostles, and we're reading about Paul's missionary journey. And today in the reading, Paul goes to Europe for the first time, which for those of us who live in Europe is actually quite a big thing. This is the first time that your apostle came to proclaim the good news on our continent. And so in a sense, we find ourselves, as we pick up this reading from the Acts of the Apostles today, as the inheritors of this journey that Paul makes, that we today have to be the ones who are proclaiming the good news. But of course, not just on the continent of Europe, but all throughout the world. So we find Paul, who's sailing from Turkey through the little islands, making his way to what is then called in the Acts of the Apostles, Macedonia. And he ends up in a town called Philippi, which is a Roman colony. Now, if we read a little bit beforehand, we find out that Paul's going there because he's had a vision whenever he was still in Turkey of a man from northern Greece, from Macedonia, who was asking for him to come to help them in order to proclaim the good news. So Paul makes a plan, let's say, to set out on this missionary journey in order to be of help to the people who are in Macedonia, who presumably have not yet heard the good news. And so he sets out to help them in the best way that he can, but in complete docility to your Spirit. He is being led by you, Jesus, in order to proclaim your good news. And he ends up in this Roman colony in Greece. Now, it was a pretty important town of its day. It had plenty of wealthy people. It had a mix of political and maybe some military, but also a lot of kind of business. And so it was a kind of a good place, let's say, to go to proclaim the good news. And Paul, we are told, goes outside of the city on this day, the Sabbath, in order to pray. Now, the reason why he goes outside of the city is probably because in that town there was no synagogue, which means to say that there weren't many friendly people there. Putting that in very basic terms to mean those who were basically sharing in Paul's faith as a Jew. And so he finds himself in a kind of a strange place. And so he goes outside of the city in order to find the Jews who are gathered there to pray beside the river, because it was often the custom in places where there was no synagogue, where the Jews would meet beside the water because they could perform their purification rites there. So Paul just goes outside the city wall in order to pray and to find others who might be gathered in prayer so that he might proclaim the good news to them. But whenever he gets there, he finds instead women. So Paul just begins to preach the good news, and we're told of this one woman, Lydia, who came from another town in the nearby area, who was presumably a wealthy enough woman because she was in some sort of trade connected with purple cloth. And so she listens to what Paul has to say. Now, she was probably a woman of pagan birth who had been already converted, in a sense, to become a Jew. So she was somebody who was on the way of faith, let's say, more so, because her heart was open to the Lord. And so she is there gathered to pray with the other woman, and she listens to what Paul has to say. And when she hears the good news of you, Jesus, she gives her heart to that completely and totally, and she is baptized there by Paul. And she then insists, it's kind of a lovely reminder of even what happens today, is that this lady who is completely fired up by faith, that she's baptized, and she insists that Paul comes to her house. And there is the insistence of a believer who wants to celebrate not just kind of the hospitable moments of life, but to really celebrate her baptism, and that, in fact, of all of her household. And so she's quite insistent upon this point. She wasn't basically taking no for an answer. Know plenty of people like that, where they just insist that Paul would come to celebrate with her. Now, I can't imagine that Paul ever thought that was going to be a distinct possibility whenever he was in Turkey, whenever he was making his plans, whenever he was sailing through all of these Greek islands. How could he ever have thought, Jesus, that you would have put Lydia in his path? And yet, because he was open and docile to your Holy Spirit, he was able to do a wonderful thing in order to proclaim the good news that woman and her entire household were saved by your grace, Jesus, in baptism. Now, Paul goes on from there, and he continues to proclaim the good news in Philippi, and he really doesn't get on very well at all. He ends up arrested and flogged and beaten, and he kind of gets himself into all sorts of trouble, and to the extent that they basically expel him from the city. But not before he converts the prison guard in the little jail where he was being held after there's an earthquake, and Paul is saved, and this man's about to kill himself. But Paul says, "Relax, it is the Lord that has helped us." And so he brings this man to faith, in a sense, because he is there to proclaim the good news. And maybe this was the one whom he had that vision of, that he would come to help him. So, in a sense, through the eyes of purely human wanderings, Paul's mission to Philippi is probably not that successful, because we have just the story of these two converts, and yet together with their whole household they are baptized. And so these are people whom you have put in his path, Lord, and through his docility to your Spirit, through his following of your plan and not some plan that he had concocted himself, he is able to do wonderful things, and the faith continues to grow and spread. Dream, and your dreams will fall short. Now, that could be any one of us at this moment of making plans, thinking about our career choices ahead, or what's going to lie beyond our exams, or wherever we find ourselves in life. Yes, we have a dream, but we have to open ourselves to be completely docile to your Spirit, Lord, to say that whatever I might plan for myself is but a shadow of what you plan for me. And so give me docility, Lord, to your Spirit, that I might do what you want me to do and not what I want to do myself. Recently, Pope Francis canonized 10 saints. One of the saints was a man, Charles de Foucauld, who had a beautiful prayer about abandonment. I abandon myself into your hands, Father. Do with me what you will. Whatever you may do, I thank you. I am ready for all. I accept all. Let only your will be done in me, and in all your creatures. I wish no more than this, O Lord. Into your hands I commend my soul. I offer it to you with all the love of my heart. For I love you, Lord, and so need to give myself, to surrender myself into your hands without reserve and with boundless confidence, for you are my Father. Jesus, give us complete and total trust in your Father, that the plans that we have might completely fall away and accept the plans that you have for us. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me during this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, St. Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.